Okay, so welcome everyone to week 4 of winter quarter for BISBA. I know the quarter is flying by. It's kind of scary how we're already in week 4, already approaching, or maybe in midterms for some of you guys as well. But we're super glad to have you guys make it out to our first workshop of winter quarter. It's a super important and also super timely workshop, as a lot of us, we're all in winter quarter. We have one more quarter after this, and then summer is a really big time to get internships. For a lot of people that are graduating, it might be a really big time to start your career, your job after you graduate. So to get there, you have to think a few weeks in advance, maybe a quarter or two, and start talking about networking, interviewing, applications, all of these different things. So we hope out of this specific meeting, although we don't have a speaker, it's going to be led by myself, the president. It's going to be led by Colin Flintoff, one of our VPs, and also Nick Kahn, our director of business administration. And we're kind of just going to go through what tips and techniques you want to have for networking and interviewing. All of us, or at least the three of the presenters, kind of have, a little bit more of a business attire. As you can tell, it's always just super important when you are doing, even if it's on Zoom, to still dress up as well a little bit. And, for girls and guys, it could look a little bit different, but we just wanted to show you guys different types of things you can wear. I have a blazer on and kind of just like a nicer top, but it's something that really does matter, because if I'm going for an interview and I'm just wearing a sweatshirt, that just looks like I don't care. And so I think it's really, really important to be aware of that. And one additional example I'll throw in real quick before we get started is last week I had a situation where I wasn't sure if it was a formal interview or if it was an informational interview. And we'll talk about the differences of those a little bit later on. But I kind of got communication from recruiters saying it was informational. One was saying it was a formal interview. Either way, I still dressed up because I thought it was important. It's always better to go and err on the side of caution and kind of dress up. So that's just kind of a beginning. And we can go ahead to the next slide and start our workshop for today. So, like I kind of said, the agenda for today, we're going to go over one, networking. What does that actually look like? And also interviewing. And we'll do breakout rooms so you guys get more time to just casually talk to us a little bit more about your experience with these things, and any questions you guys have on our presented material. So, we'll talk about what does it mean to network, various ways of networking, how to present yourself to others, and then we'll go into our breakout room, and then we'll start the second half, which will be about interviewing. So the different interview formats and styles that I kind of mentioned, like an informational, and then we'll go into just interviewing techniques. How do you approach it? Then we'll talk about post-interview questions. The interview is not over just once, the interview is over. You have it's really important to follow up. So we'll talk about that. We'll go into a breakout room once again to be very casual and candid about our experience on these things and any questions you guys all may have. And so lastly, we'll talk about, once again, next play, what we have for next week. But without further ado, we'll go into our next slide. Okay, last disclaimer before we start. It is important to realize we're going to kind of throw a lot of information at you guys, but there isn't actually one correct way to network, right? You might hear people talk about, networking in different ways, and you might get different feedback from different people, but it really is kind of figuring out what ends up working for you. And everyone has different methods. So in the same way that you kind of would tailor your resume, cover letter, or email or conversation to the position you're applying for, we also have our own ways to go about our network. And we can go to the next slide. So first, just giving a just general description. What is networking? So networking is the process of discovering and making use of connections between people for career advancement. And basically, it's networking can happen at any time, in any setting. It could be, actually in an interview. It can be just on LinkedIn, but it could also just be like if you were grabbing coffee with someone and you start talking, or, you hear those conversations where you were on a plane flight with someone, you just start talking to the person next to you and hear about what they're doing in their career and all of these things. That is all considered networking. It's very useful in gathering information about a certain industry, organization, career path, or skill. And it also helps build relationships. This is very key. It helps build relationships with people who can provide information and valuable advice. And this could all lead you into future opportunities. So, just to further kind of exemplify all of that, UCLA's Career Center had a really important quote. And in fact, it said, end quote, it's a great way, networking is a great way to learn more about organizations and familiarize yourself with unfamiliar job titles. There's a lot of stuff out there that we don't know, right? Specifically, recent studies show that 80% of jobs and internships are filled actually through networking. And you might ask why, because you might be applying online and all of these different things. But what really, really matters, I mean, the application is a necessary step, but also what really can help you solidify that internship or that job is if you know someone there, or if someone there knows you. That can help, push your resume to the front of the hiring manager, and it can just make you more of a viable candidate because you already have a relationship with the company. And then you can think about it in a very casual way too. If you are trying to get someone to, I don't know, walk your dog or something like that, you're going to go with someone that you trust, or someone that you've heard a good note from, maybe a family friend or a friend of a friend, versus some random person. And so it's the same way in jobs, where it's like you could be a super qualified candidate, but networking is that necessary complement to your resume and your academics and all of those things as well. And we can go on. Oh yeah.
Yeah, here real quick. I just wanted to build off that. If we could go that last slide real quick, sorry. So yeah, just building on that, guys, I got a couple examples real quick of how I really want to emphasize that point of networking can happen at any time and in any setting, and you never know what can come from interactions with people. So for example, while growing up, I played football here. While growing up, I developed good relationships with private coaches for football as a punter. And thankfully down the road later in high school, that led to really good opportunities where they were pushing film onto the desks of coaches that they know. And so those relationships really helped me get recruited for football as well, just by being personable and interacting with them and caring to get to know them outside of just football and stuff like that. And then most recently, I got an internship opportunity a couple years ago in the most random place. I was down in Cabo on a family vacation for winter break. This was 2 years ago. And we got dinner with some family friends. And what do you know? I hit it off with the guy's dad. And by the end of the evening, he told me if I ever wanted to come work for him, to let him know, and that he could help me get a foot in the door with the interview process and stuff like that. And it turned out the guy was the president and CEO of the company. And so thankfully it helped give me a little bit of a leg up in the interview process and whatnot. But whole point is I just, when I was interacting with the guy, I just cared to get to know him, not even seeking anything. That was the last thing on my mind. But yeah, just the most random times and places you can get some crazy life-changing opportunities. So you never know when you could do this, and it's always good to be ready. And now I'm going to pass it on to Nick, who has another story to share with regards to how networking can be really powerful.
Yeah, thanks, Colin. That's a really fun story. I also have an interesting one too. It actually happened twice. At a bar mitzvah for my cousin, it was actually the younger cousin, and then the older cousin, and then the younger one. I ran into this guy named Jeff just randomly at the bar mitzvah. He was talking about how he's starting his own sports company. I was like, this is really cool. I didn't even know this guy existed. Just met him at a bar mitzvah, and now I currently work for his company, which is really cool. And so, it wasn't something like, I'm going to go to a bar mitzvah and find a guy who owns a company. No, I just, went to support my cousin, and he was there. And you never know when you just start talking like, hey, did you watch the game yesterday? Or you find a common interest and then you hit it off. And the rest is history. So just look out for opportunities, even if they don't necessarily, you wouldn't ever think that they would be there. There's always an opportunity somewhere.
And now we can go ahead to the next slide. Thank you guys for those examples. Um, so how to network or how you can start. One way is a cold email. What does that mean? It means you're directly giving an outreach to someone that you haven't been introduced to before, but maybe you got their email from one way or another. By chance, you can honestly find a lot of people's emails, work emails specifically on Google. It's kind of like, it's not like a flaw, but kind of a hack at the same time. But it's very important if you do find someone's email or if you guess it, because a lot of companies and organizations use the same email format, that you approach the email the right way. So don't just grab someone's email, say, hi, my name's, Christina, and I'd like to meet you. It's like, no, there's a right way to do it. And the right way is, number one, this is super, super critical, is to do your research on the person and on the company and maybe on the role specifically that they do. And there's multiple ways you can do that. You can Google the person, you can LinkedIn search the person, find, whatever you need to find, but it's so important to do your research. One, because you want to grab the attention of the person or the recipient that you're talking to by tailoring the email specifically to their interest or industry and their business interests. But two, because they know if you're doing an outreach, it's a possible opportunity to do an informational interview. It's a possible, networking opportunity, but you don't want to look like you're just asking for something, and just kind of almost being what they call like a social climber. You don't just want to reach out to, the CEO of all these companies just because you want to get a job. That's not what networking is. Networking is still about building meaningful relationships. So please, please, please be very intentional with who you reach out to. It's not just a game of numbers. It's a game also of, quality over just quantity. So do your research is number one. Number two, introduce yourself, of course, and validate yourself. If you do have any direct connections, to the company, to the person, definitely mention them. That's just really important so that you can say, hey, I saw, you work for, let's say, ESPN, and my cousin, or someone that I saw, the other day also works for ESPN, or I really look up to this person at ESPN, whatever it is, try to make a commonality. Or it could be, I saw you also went to UCLA. That is one of the easiest and probably most effective ways of making a connection, is even if you don't know the person, it's like, oh, I'm a UCLA student. I saw you also went to UCLA. So find a way to also connect with them, right? And then also keep the email pretty short. Please don't send them a long email, 3 to 4 page, 3 to 5 page essay in MLA point, 12 font, whatever it is. Don't do that. Please don't. They will not read it. Like, that will probably just be a quick, delete or spam. So make it pretty short, make it maybe a paragraph or less, not too many sentences. Try to keep it concise, because their time is very, very valuable too. So you just kind of want to get to the point. Then also it is, and you can include, like it says on the slide, you can include, a resume or a cover letter. That can just be something to validate you further, and just show that you did some work and you're not just asking them for everything. So you can say, here, I've even attached my resume, if you could take a look at it, or something like that. So then also, always, so once you do an outreach, you don't know if they're going to respond. Don't get mad. Also, if they don't respond, you're not entitled to a response. So sometimes, I've sent multiple, maybe cold emails or cold outreaches via LinkedIn and things like that. I don't get a response. I'm not going to lie to everything, and that's okay. It's kind of the Wayne Gretzky quote, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So still take that shot, shoot your shot, but don't get offended, if it doesn't come out, right? So just kind of it's kind of a hustle, but it's really important. So also, it's important to do it right. So the last step is always follow up and demonstrate appreciation. So you can demonstrate appreciation throughout the original email, saying thank you so much for your time. A good quote could also be, your time and consideration are greatly appreciated. Something like that, right? Hit them with something nice at the end. And then always follow up, like I said. So don't, if you end up, they reply, it's a successful connection, you end up, the ask could be to get on an informational Zoom call or whatever it is, or even if you just have a specific questions you want to ask them directly in the email, you can do that, see if they get back. However, if they do get back, always send a follow-up thank you. And don't just ask for a job. Don't say like, hey, I'm looking for a job, or hey, I want an internship. What can you give me? That just gives off very creepy vibes, to be completely honest and frank. So just don't do that. You don't want to be that person. So just realize you're building a relationship once again, more than asking for a job. If you are, let's say, we're going with the ESPN example, if you did apply for some internship, or if you did apply for a job and you did end up, they replied and you did end up connecting with them, I think it's all right personally to, say, hey, I also just interviewed for this role, or hey, I also just applied for this role at ESPN. Is there anyone you could possibly connect me with? Anything like that. So it's very open-ended. It's not saying, hey, can you get me that job? But it makes sense to be able to say, hey, is there anyone you think you can connect me with for this job or internship? That's if they reply. And lastly, I guess for the follow-up is just be very clear, and try to make it as easy as them as possible. Don't overload them with like overbearing questions, but just keep it as clean as possible. And we can go ahead to the next slide. So like I said, LinkedIn or UCLA One, this is a much easier, in my personal opinion, route to outreach and networking, just because it's literally social media platforms set up to network. So cold email, like we said, is one option, but at this day and age, a lot of professionals and hopefully a lot of you guys have a LinkedIn. If not, I would definitely create one. And and if you haven't heard of UCLA One, it's specifically LinkedIn for UCLA. So that's also a very, very easy platform to be able to build networks, build relationships with people in a meaningful way. So the reason why is because connecting with alumni will help you expand your network. It's also important to use these platforms to refine your search across the different socials to find people in the industry that you're interested in. You might ask like, how can I do that? Or how do I use LinkedIn? I have one, but like, what do I really do with it? A really good way to reach out to alumni or find, maybe a career you may be interested in is to go onto your LinkedIn, search, UCLA, click on the page. Then you'll be able to click on alumni. You have access to literally all the alumni that are on LinkedIn right there. You'll have access to the ones you're connected with or maybe not connected with. And let's say, once again, with the ESPN example, you want to work at ESPN, you just search within the alumni tab at UCLA, search ESPN. And then you'll see all the alumni that work at ESPN, or vice versa. If you wanted to look, just search ESPN on the LinkedIn homepage. And then it usually will say, hey, 3 people from your school were hired here, or whatever company you want to work for. So you can do that for company specific. You can also do that for role specific. Hey, I'm really interested in being a GM, or I'm really interested in going into sports marketing. So then it's like, I can still go into that UCLA page, click alumni, look up sports marketing, and then do the same exact thing that I kind of said. You can try to connect with someone, send them a short blurb or message. I know if you're not already connected with them, you do have a limitation. So those are all just different ways to be able to outreach. And once again, you just kind of introduce yourself, say, I saw you also went to UCLA, do a little bit of research, try to build, that connection, and say, would love to connect. And, if they connect, you can have a further conversation from that. So it never hurts to ask, to connect. In worst case scenarios, they don't respond. So like I said, we go back to rule number 1, don't get offended. And then once again, always remember to thank them for their time. So I'll pass it on to Colin as well.
Yeah, actually, sorry, still for that last one, I just want to say real quick, guys, we do have some exciting speakers coming up. One of them in particular is one of the top executives at the Dodgers, and she's one of the biggest names in the advertising world. And literally, the way we secured that is I literally was doing exactly what Christina has just been talking about, of just reaching out to tons of people, especially the UCLA alums, which thankfully she is. And so just through doing that, making a personal connection and stuff like that, you never know who, when you throw a ton of stuff at the wall, you never know what might stick. And so thankfully it stuck with her. And also, as someone who's got some experience in sales internships a couple years ago and last year, there's something called the sales funnel. All right. So you got to sometimes put out like 10 shots or something like that up here at the top of the funnel. And then you have what's called leads as they start to come through. And then come the very end of it, you have hot leads and then actual connections or business deals, whatever you want to say. And usually, guys, sometimes if you shoot 10, you're usually probably only getting hits on like 1 to 3 of them come the end of it. But that's just a reality you have to accept. And that's a part of the game. And the sooner you can realize that and work with it, the sales funnel, you can really work it to your advantage and become very successful at it. You just have to be willing to put the time and the effort in. So yeah, next slide.
So I'm going to talk about the different kind of networking events. So to be clear, these are just 6 of there's a lot of networking events, and obviously things networking can be in any scenario, but here are kind of the 6 main kind of organized ones that you'll see. So the first is happy hour. Happy hour is where you basically meet with people in a very casual setting. Usually alcohol is involved and appetizers, so it's very laid back. When you're applying for a job or you're interviewing, I'll talk about this later. Being personable is very important, showing that you can fit with the company, that you are someone that you want to go have drinks with. Yes, when you're 21, you want to have drinks with, like that's a person people want to work with. And so this is an opportunity at a happy hour event to kind of show that you're that kind of person. And people remember you like, hey, I thought that person was really cool. They were really nice to talk to. And I thought they had a fun energy, and that helps you. So when you go to apply, they remember that. So it's not only about what your resume said or what your qualifications are, it's also about the way you present yourself when you're talking to people. The second kind is an industry specific seminar. So this could be a consulting seminar, investment banking, accounting, sport, anything. Basically, you've got speakers who will come in and they will give a presentation on a specific subject. And there's time usually before or after where you get to network with people. And this can be done over Zoom, this can be done in person. But basically, you get an opportunity after they speak to either speak to a panel of people or basically just network. Actually, we had this is a short anecdote, but we went to a seminar on the bill about name, image, and likeness. And after they had the panel speak, this was last year, we had an opportunity to go up and speak to the different panelists. And that was really impactful. And if you don't do that, then you don't get to meet people. So going to the seminar is cool, but getting to speak to people is the important part. And I got a business card, we got an email, stuff like that. And then a virtual group. This is something that obviously has grown a lot in COVID. Basically, you got an opportunity to meet people online. Basically, it's like a seminar, but online. Usually there's a Q&A. You get to ask people questions, talk about your basically whatever they're talking about. It's very much bigger now. Career fairs. This is a huge one. Freshmen probably don't know much about this, but every year there were multiple career fairs that happened at UCLA. They can either happen near like the IM fields, or they've happened near Dixon Court, all those places. Basically, all these different companies come along and they have booth setups, and you get to go and talk to recruiters. You get to give them their resume. You can get information about how to apply. And then if you are, once again, personable, they'll remember you and what you talked about, and that can help you as you're applying to the job. Workshops, just like the one we're giving, this is an opportunity to learn skills. While this isn't necessarily, we're not networking with you guys, but you can, during a workshop, network with the people who are giving the workshop, and that'll help you get connections later down the line. And then the last one is speed networking. It's kind of like speed dating, but you basically get to meet with one-on-one with like a professional in a really rapid time. You get like 1 minute to talk to them. And this is where having like an elevator pitch or having some way to sell yourself and to show who you are in 1 minute is really important. So obviously this is not all of them, and there are a lot of different ways, but this is kind of the 6 main kind of network events that you'll see throughout your time in college mostly. It changes as you get older. Networking is a much different kind of system.
Cool. We can go on to the next slide. So now we're gonna go. So this is halfway mark. We're gonna go into some breakout rooms pretty briefly, and we're gonna talk probably about like 10 minutes or less. We're gonna talk about, are you on experience with networking, any questions you may have. So Paul, can you
And
set up
guys,
our breakout room?
yeah, make sure to seek out some advice for your own personal situation as well.
I think we're all back now in the main room. I hope that was helpful and productive for all of you guys as well. Just know we're also on the e-board, myself as well included. Um, Always open for any follow-up questions or questions you guys may have later on. Always feel free to email. We can get on another one-on-one to discuss more things and help you guys out with all of that. And we can go on to the next slide.
Alrighty. So yeah, guys, we wanted to make a disclaimer real quick, kind of like we did at the beginning of that little networking part as we move on to this interview section of the presentation. So we do just want to reiterate everything we say are just tips, and that like anything in life, there's really no one cookie cutter perfect way to do this when you go about interviewing, because guess what? Every single opportunity is different. And so that means each interviewer is looking at something different and looking for different qualities, but we can just kind of lead you in the right direction. And hey, we're all going through this as well. So it's really a learning process for all of us. And looking at that next point, the best way to learn is to really just practice and ask interviewers for constructive criticism. I don't know if you guys remember last week when Peter Beveridge, CEO of iBlack, spoke to us, but he said the best thing he likes hearing from other people is when they constructively criticize him, because that's what's going to help him get better and stuff. Okay. So don't ever be afraid to receive some criticism, especially with things that you may feel a little uncomfortable with and you're looking to improve in. And then this final point here, all right, you always want to try and cast as wide a net as possible, and don't be afraid to take on lots of interviews, even if it's for ones you're not necessarily interested in, because gaining experience can only serve to help. And to build on it real quick, I just want to share a little anecdote about how I landed my internship for this next summer. So I got that through taking on an interview in an industry that I was not really considering at all. All right. So just real quick to let you know which industry I ended up in, I'm going to be doing a sales internship in the cybersecurity world for the company that does cybersecurity for our U.S. military, armed forces, all of them, all the branches, Target, MasterCard, and Amazon. And so basically, guys, I just took that interview just because I was like, hey, you know what? It's another interview. I'll get a chance to practice. But what do you know is I got to get to know the opportunity a little bit better. It worked out very, very well to where I'm now very grateful for it, because I get to explore sales, which is a role that I very much enjoy. And I get to do it in an industry that still does work closely with sports organizations, right? Because a lot of these pro teams require cybersecurity for practice film, playbooks, medical records, all that. I'm sure some of the teams facing the Patriots back in the day would have loved to have some of that, because Lord knows my guys, they seem to have cheated a little bit back in the day. But whole point is you never know, just like networking, you never know what opportunities might turn out to be the greatest thing to ever happen to you. Not putting this on that level for me per se, but it's certainly something that turned out to be a really great thing just because I took it on for the experience. So
Okay, so now we're going to be talking about the specific types of interviews that you may encounter. One of them that I keep naming is the informational interview. I think this is like the best type of one. This doesn't necessarily lead, and usually probably doesn't lead to a job because it's not an actual professional interview, but it is super valuable because you're seeking advice in a very just genuine way and learning more about a particular employer, person, job, function, sector, whatever that may be. And so interviewing experts in the field is just like one more way to add to your employment knowledge base to maybe figure out what you want to do, because we really don't know what we want to do until you see or hear about something. You might have never known about, a specific career or how all of your interests can align into one until you meet someone that does that. So informational interview. To a Zoom or a telephone interview. Usually this is like the first first phase of interview. If you're applying for an internship or a job, they will kind of do a screening interview with you, and that's usually just over the phone. And sometimes it's via Zoom as well. And so it's really important though, if it is, on the phones, and especially if it's not in person, they can't really see your body language. So it's really important to be able to speak enthusiastically, have positive, short answers. And don't forget to ask also at the end, what the next step is from here. And so then going into another type of interview is just like the individual interview, or versus like a small group interview. So obviously the main difference is I've actually been in both situations. So sometimes companies just prefer you doing a one-on-one. Some companies prefer doing a group setting. And so it's really important though, if you are in a group setting, and in an individual one, just to highlight your own attributes and try to make yourself distinguishable. Because even if you're doing a one-on-one interview or individual interview, you're still going against other candidates. And so realizing in what ways can you make yourself stand out is super important. If you are in a, a small group interview, definitely don't like call out the person next to you and directly compare. That would look really, really bad. But just highlight yourself in different ways. Maybe it's teamwork, problem solving, communication, or organizational skills. And it's very, very important to be structured in your answers, and just try to like speak with confidence. And how do you get that? Maybe if you're not as comfortable or haven't done as many interviews, for one, experience does help. And that can be experienced doing informational interviews. We all have capabilities to do those. And so that's just experience talking to other people about yourself. That makes you more comfortable as well. And another one also in general for just like being more comfortable is once again your preparation. So it's really important to map out, and even when you're practicing public speaking or anything like that, to write it down. Write it down before the interview. How, like if they're gonna ask you, tell me about yourself in the beginning, they almost always ask you that, right? And so finding a very short and concise, but like I guess like aligning story, to tell about yourself, how you got to UCLA, what are your passions. It's so important to be able to tell that in a very like boxed up manner where it's almost like in a bow and it's like, this is me. You don't want to be scrambling all over the place, super unorganized. And the way to avoid that, once again, is just practice, right? And just know what your main bullets are going to be, the key points you want to or have to hit, in describing yourself to this person, because you only get that one shot, right? So then going off of that, you also have a second or on-site interview. So that is if you did your first, interview and they liked it, they liked learning about you and you answered the questions pretty well, there will be a second interview most of the time. So that second interview means you're that one step closer to getting that internship or that job. And sometimes the on-site means they actually will send you to their specific, company or whatever the case may be. So, and they will pay for your flight and all of these relocation things as well. So both of those are also very, very important too. And so that means you were successful. They want to know more. And so just try to find out as much about the agenda or itinerary, things you might need to plan for that as well, just so you can be less anxious and more prepared for that opportunity. So the last one is the behavioral interview. So looking at that, sometimes interviewers may ask questions like, tell me a time when, and it could be when you overcame a failure or something like that. So just kind of be a little bit more prepared, and maybe you can do some research on behavioral interview questions as well, because that is also one type of interview that they will do as well. And we can go to the next slide.
All right, guys. So looking here, I just kind of shared some stuff about the internship I just landed in. So I wanted to share, here were some notes that I created prior to the interview. All right. In order to make sure I came into it guns ablazing, ready to go. All right. So I'm not going to get too into the nitty gritty, but just real quick, helping you break it down a little so you can understand the madness that's kind of going on these pages is I always have a thing of notes ready to go before the interview, just based on who the guy is. All right. Obviously blocked out his name for privacy and whatnot. But I knew he was a U of A grad, so I made sure to mention some Pac-12 stuff. If you see there, I wrote he's from Boston. I'm a big Boston fan. I made sure to be on top of all my news so we could connect on that and make a really personal, lasting connection. I also saw that he did business school in Lake Geneva in Switzerland, which was a place I went on vacation once as a kid, and went to the Olympic Museum, which he knew all about, and he loved that. And then in looking at the company more specifically, moving beyond just small talk with the guy, I knew exactly what was going on in the news with the company called Tanium. So this was a couple hours of research I did, basically to know entirely what's going on. I knew what the company was valued at. I knew how much they were profiting each year. And one huge thing, if there's one takeaway from the madness on these pages, guys, is I would really recommend trying to get to know the culture of a place. Okay. Particularly know their core values. All right. Some of the buzzwords. So I knew for them, they really liked words like persistence, passion, integrity, innovation. So I kind of knew what I was doing in that interview to really drop some of those terms because they're buzzwords that they love to hear. Okay. And then also I was prepared with an extensive answer. I only took some of these things when I used it for when they wanted to know from me, why Tanium, why us, why do you want to be with us? And so I explained some of those things, like I explained to you guys that you're trusted by all the armed forces. 12 of the top 15 US banks trust you with cybersecurity. 70% of top retailers trust them, whole bunch of things. I also saw they have a one team, one fight mission, which reminds me of playing football throughout high school at UCLA as well. I also made connections to, I have an uncle who's a sales manager for another cybersecurity, or not cybersecurity, sorry, just like a technology data information firm called Cohesity. So I made sure to make that connection. And then also I really sold myself right there at the end. You could see I said I'm made for this role. I'm personal and driven. I know I can get it done. I know I can be a game changer and make this place a better place. And all in all, here, we can go to the next slide now too, and I'll continue talking. All in all, guys, these types of notes really helped me to crush it, just because there were over 30 plus people interviewed and I was the only one to get the job. So it was a very competitive process, and I had to go through over 4 rounds of interviews to get this. So this is just an example of one of the write-ups I did for the very first round. And then the next rounds kept coming and I used a similar strategy, and it obviously ended up paying off. And then always come the interviews, guys, you got to have some questions ready to ask them. All right. And I know we'll go over some more of this. But like I had some things of like, so what are some skills you look for in an ideal salesman? You know, what's the short-term and long-term outlook? What are some of the biggest challenges you face in your role and how do you overcome them? All right. And then moving on to that second part, you can kind of see, fortunately, because the guy liked me, he actually started giving me notes on the guy he knew I was going to be talking to in the next round. All right. So he made sure to tell me that, hey, this guy can be pretty intense, come at him hard. All right. He said I sounded a little like robotic. So he said, try and memorize these types of things about myself more so it doesn't sound like I'm really reading. All right. I had felt I'd practiced it enough, but clearly this was some good constructive criticism that led to some good development for me. He also said that the guy is a huge Dodgers fan. He said the guy is sick of COVID, so make sure to mention some stuff like that. And yeah, just to be prepared to answer some of these questions. And so all in all, he gave me the inside notes of how to get this guy and be on his good side from the get-go. So that was very helpful, and all this stuff can pay off. And so next slide, please. All right. And then this is something I also study before interviews every time, and we're not going to go too deep into it. Don't worry. But I always have this go-to answer sheet on my Google Drive that I print and I research and practice before every one. So I have an answer already ready to go with the whole "tell me about yourself" question. One of my favorite things is Teddy Roosevelt's "Man in the Arena," which in summary is basically him just saying it is better to dare greatly and fail than to have never dared at all. And that's something that's big in sales. Like I was talking about that funnel. If you got to shoot a lot of shots just to get some of them to stick and to win. So you cannot be afraid to fail. And then I also had my question ready for why them. And obviously, since this is a doc, it can be applicable to a bunch of other companies. Those were some of the other ones I was talking to at the time, like Fox, CBS. I was also talking with the Dodgers as well. And then also, this is another question that always comes up is greatest strengths, greatest weaknesses. All right. So I have answers ready for those. All right. Personable, confident, courageous, leadership. And then I also had some weaknesses ready to go, which Lord knows I could work on. I can be a little perfectionistic, self-criticism, and not as much experience as I'd like. So these are some examples, guys, of if you really want to come in there and really just wow an interviewer and make sure you get that next round or hopefully get the job. These are just a few of the things I would recommend doing and coming in this prepared. I got some really nice feedback from the guys, which was cool. And they said that of all the people they interviewed, that they could tell I was by far the most prepared. They really liked my confidence and personality that I brought to the table. And I got to tell you guys, when you put in the work like this, you can't help but feel confident because you know what you're doing. So I really hope this can help. And if you guys ever want to reach out to me and talk more about this on a more personal level, one-to-one, that would be great. So yeah, next slide. All right. So looking at manners. All right, guys. Manners and etiquette are obviously pretty important during interviews, okay? Like I said earlier in the chat, the way you present yourself and interact with people are very, very key factors in trying to impress the people you're going to be talking with, all right? So here are some tips kind of written out for you, for those of you who maybe don't have quite as extensive of experience in the world of interviewing and networking and all that, okay? So what are a few things we want to do? All right, so we want to make sure to be extra friendly, okay? So stand and smile when the interviewer walks into the room, or in this case, in the Zoom room, do not stand, but definitely make sure to smile and make good first impressions. All right. Obviously, this hopefully will be back soon, but it's not here now. Firm handshakes. All right. Good eye contact. Don't have junk in your right hand, and be prepared for the handshake. So, for example, if you got a water bottle, you always make sure to keep that in your left hand. That way, your right hand is ready to go to shake hands. Same thing goes for when you're at a networking event. You always hold your drink in your left hand. Have the right hand ready to shake at all times because you never know when you'll need it. Another thing, be articulate. All right. Listen carefully before responding with your answers. If you're prepared with them, then you know what you're doing. You can just fire away. That's how I felt. And then another thing too is sit up straight. Don't slouch. Have good body language. All right. Really present some confidence. And sometimes it requires a little faking it until you make it. All right, guys. I was not super confident a few years ago. All right. It took me a while to get to the level of confidence where I'm at, and it takes some work, but it's something that anyone can get to, no matter who you are, no matter how unconfident you think you might be. This is something that I promise you can attain with a little bit of hard work and taking some risk. All right. So some major don'ts are during dinner interviews. Obviously, this goes without saying, really should not be having too much alcohol or drinking or whatever, and especially talking with your mouth full. And then always make sure to have a lot of gratitude and say a big thank you to the employers for dinner. Never really sit here and have your arms crossed. You kind of look kind of disinterested, defensive, and it's just not a good look. Also, try and don't have your hands around your face or playing with your jewelry, whatever. Also not a good look. And then also trying to elaborate on your answers and give good stories, right? Obviously, you don't want to go too long, but do not be giving one word answers that are really short and boring, okay? Unless they really specifically dictate you to do that. All right. So next.
Okay, so the next part, this is a key part of any resume, any interview that you might have, is the walk me through your resume. This can come in any form. It can be tell me about yourself or walk me through your resume. I'm going to keep this short, as it says on the slide, but what's really important is to really highlight key portions of your resume. You really don't want to go through every line item of your resume. Make sure to talk about things that are relevant also to what you're interviewing for. So if you're doing a sports interview, I wouldn't talk about how you did research for a medical, what's it called, do medical research. Like, not that that's not an important part of your story, but it's just not as relevant as talking about some of your other experiences. Really, the key thing is keeping it short and making sure that you really highlight the things that make you you, and be personable. Don't be very robotic to it. Don't make it sound rehearsed, but make it sound like you're having a conversation and you're talking about yourself and putting yourself in the best light. And then the next slide is about common behavioral and technical questions. So often in an interview, I've led many interviews, and these questions are definitely very important. And the thing about it is you're going to hear a lot of similar questions when you're interviewed. Here are just 6 that I found. I'm not going to read through each one of them, but what I really want to point out is prepare stories around these questions. Prepare, if you were to give any of these questions, you should be prepared with 1 and most definitely 2 stories that you could be able to talk about. Because I've had in an interview before, it's like, how do you handle a challenge? And then I go through it, and to give example, and then they're like, give me another one. And a lot of people get flustered by that because they prepare one thing for it, but really they needed another example. And so having things prepared, but once again, don't sound robotic, don't sound rehearsed. You can say, can you give me a second to gather my thoughts? That's always acceptable. And at the end of the day, these questions, while not the only ones you'll see, are a lot of key ones that I would look into and make sure that you can kind of answer each one of these. And if you can't, then maybe prepare yourself as you go into these interviews.
Okay, perfect. So now, basically almost at the end of our meeting for today, but post interview questions. So after the interview, you will be expected to have questions prepared to ask. Please have at least one. It's really, really a bad look if you do not have not one question to ask. And here's a give me, like if you literally cannot think of one, but you should come up with more, is hey, what's the next step? I've really enjoyed, learning more about this opportunity. What's the next step in this interview process? That's one you should always ask in general. So there's already one, right? You should come up with another or, three, depending on time. You might not even be able to get to them, but please prepare some questions to ask them, about the role. And it could be like, hey, what Colin said earlier, what would be, an ideal candidate? What type of qualification do they have? Or what does a day look like, in this role or this internship? So those are just a few examples, but we continue to have conversation more about other ones if you have any questions on that. It's really important to do your research on the company and interviewee, like I said, or like we've discussed. If they give you the name for the specific person you are interviewing with, look them up. And yeah, look them up on LinkedIn, find a commonality already. And so you already can kind of see their face, imagine it, all of that. And that's really, really important. You can see, oh, they also, were an athlete, or hey, they also were a psychology major, whatever it is. It's not necessarily saying like, hey, I saw this about you, but it's when now I know when I'm saying, hey, I'm a psychology major, I already know the interviewer or interviewee, or yeah, the interviewer is going to say like, oh, wow, I was also a psychology major. So it's like, I already know she was going to, or he or she is going to say that, or is going to resonate, but I'm not going to like come at it really creepy and say like, hey, I saw that you were a psychology major. So just things like that give you more confidence as well. So, and we have a few examples once again on post interview questions, and we can go to the next slide for time.
Yeah. So real quick, guys. Yeah. Well, out of respect for your time, we'll fly through some of these last ones. All right. So some of our incredible resources here. We got the Career Center. All right. Highly recommend checking out. It's incredibly useful for finding standard formats for resumes, cover letters, how to go about networking, interviewing, whatever. It's just great to get in touch with them. All right. And then we got UCLA Handshake. All right. It's the best place to access it's the best place to access our career counselors, where you can go make appointments, and believe me, they want to help you. All right. It's also simple, quick access to job applications. All right. Where you can directly message with industry professionals. So it's somewhat similar to LinkedIn in that sense. And then you got VMOC, Parker Dewey, and the Career Guide, which is also on Handshake. And then you go to the Career Center tab within it, and then you click on resources. All right. So VMOC provides immediate AI, artificial intelligence grading and feedback on your professional materials based on criteria from employers and also UCLA standards in general. And then you got Parker Dewey, which provides easy access to paid remote micro internships. So if you're looking to build that resume and just get stuff to talk about while networking and interviewing, this is a great place to go check out. You also got the Career Guide, which, like I said earlier, it can show you many important things that can be tailored more specific to your major, your club, sport, position, whatever you're seeking. And then we got UCLA One, which is basically, as we mentioned earlier, our own version of LinkedIn with UCLA students and alumni only. Great resource. Highly recommend checking it out. And then LinkedIn is always just a great tool for networking with anyone from anywhere. And yeah, I definitely would recommend creating that and trying to buff up your profile as best you can starting right now. And then we got Glassdoor, which is basically what I think of as my cheat code for getting jobs. That's where I did a lot of research on Tanium, the company I'm going to be working for next summer. There were a lot of things where they literally like tell people about their former interview experiences and stuff like that. So it's basically the Yelp of a company from their workers' perspective. Okay. You can also find and apply for jobs on there. Okay. So it's similar to Handshake in that sense. And it also shares overview of the companies and its values. So you can tailor your language, like I was talking about earlier, to fit their culture more in your resume, cover letters, interviews, networking opportunities, whatever. And yeah, so people sharing their work experiences is very helpful to know heading into it. So you just know what you're walking into. All right. Next slide. All right. So in conclusion, guys, if you couldn't tell, preparation is everything. All right. So do your homework on companies. I really can't emphasize it enough. Study them like I did, study their people, show attention to detail. And I promise you, you do this and you do it well, you'll knock it out of the ballpark. Especially you got UCLA on your resume. Like that honestly holds a lot of weight right there. All right. So pair this with that and it's literally, it's a home run. All right. Many average people out there really overlook these simple things because guess what? They do actually require a little bit of effort, but a little bit of effort can really go a long way, guys. Okay, so really go for it. And like I said earlier about Teddy Roosevelt's man in the arena of it's better to dare greatly and fail than it is to have never dared at all. Really don't be afraid to get started and don't be afraid to fail. All right. Fail forward, fail upward, however you want to think about it. It really is the best teacher of all, just like constructive criticism and all that. You really don't know until you try. And so trying is the best teacher, and really just go for it. Okay.
So we're actually not going to go into breakout rooms because we don't have enough time. But once again, if you have any follow-up questions about any of this, please feel free to email BISBA or reach out, via our BISBA Instagram, however is easiest for you. Get in contact with one of us, and we're more than willing to answer any questions. Next slide as well, same thing. And just real brief, we will add this link of, we have job opportunities for you guys, internship opportunities that we thought might be of interest to you. We are going to share that in our recap email tomorrow. You can also find them on uclabsba.com under opportunities. So definitely take a look at that if you're looking at, hey, what do I want to do this summer? How do I get an internship? What internship am I even going to go for? We did a little bit of work for you. So take a look at that. And once again, we will send that in the recap email. So if you're not already on our members list or you don't get our newsletter, please also, let us know once again via Instagram or via our website, however is easiest for you. Next slide. Same thing for this. There's a mock interview opportunity if you want to build your experience and get more comfortable with interviews. We're going to also send this link in our recap email as well tomorrow. And yeah, so you guys will see that. And Colin also just sent it for you guys in the chat. We can go to the next slide. So thank you guys all for sitting in for this entire meeting. I hope you guys learned a lot. Please let us know if you did, if there was something of value specifically for you guys during this meeting, or something that just hit home, something that was helpful. We'd love to hear feedback from you guys. And once again, you guys can let us know in the chat. You can let us know via email. We'll do a feedback form. So all of that, we want to hear all your insights from tonight's meeting, but hope it was super helpful. And going into next week, so one of our, most renowned speakers that we are bringing in for the quarter is Martin Jarmond. If you don't already know, it's kind of a big name around campus right now. He is our new athletic director at UCLA. And he also just signed our Jordan deal, which is pretty awesome. So we have the luxury of being able to bring in our athletic director for BISBA. So super, super excited about that. Definitely spread the word. Tell your friends, even if they're not in BISBA already, tell them to join, because it's a really exclusive opportunity to get some one-on-one, some FaceTime, not necessarily one-on-one, but some FaceTime with the AD to hear from his journey, his story, insights of what it took to get here at UCLA and all the things he's kind of going through. So it should be one of our best meetings. So definitely spread the word to family, friends, really anyone that you think could be interested to this as well. We can go to the next slide. Reminder of our attendance policy. And once again, we'll send the attendance sheet in the chat, but please fill this out if you haven't attended any of our meetings before. Even if you have, we just like to, keep tabs on who's attending our meetings, and just so we can give you guys credit. And we also do some little giveaways as well. Without giving away what we give away, we do some little gifts as well. So please fill that out so we can give you guys your attendance points as well. And once again, thank you guys all for attending, and hope you guys learned a lot. Hope you guys have a great rest of your week 4, and definitely check out our socials. Give us a follow if you haven't already. But yeah.